Well, good morning, everybody. I'm back. Welcome to another edition of CGS Live. This is Houdini with me, Daniel Hourigan, head of effects here at CG Spectrum. I hope everybody is doing well. Feels like it's been forever since I've done one of these. Let me know if there's any audio issues or if you guys are having a hard time hearing me. I had a little bit of a break over Christmas, but then I got sick with COVID straight after I came back, and that kind of set me back a few weeks, which is why I haven't been streaming for a while. But I'm all better, thankfully. Yeah, I'm back. I don't really have much of a plan for today, but hey Nadia, how's it going? Hey Axel. I thought I'd just jump into Houdini and play around, show you guys a few tricks and things, maybe talk about some rendering stuff that I've been looking at recently, using depth of field and some other tricks for small scale stuff. Hey Shrihari. So yeah, let's jump in. I'm gonna dive in. Hopefully this all works. Let me know if you have any questions or stuff you want to talk about today. As I said, I don't have much of a plan, so if you have any kind of questions or anything that you might want to see, then feel free to let me know. But one thing that I've been looking at recently for sort of, I was doing some sort of motion graphics type stuff, and just kind of having a look at small scale things rather than big scale explosions and all that kind of stuff, getting really kind of macro. And yeah, I guess you could think about this stuff as like medical imaging or that sort of thing, where you're really sort of zoomed in to almost a microscopic level. So I might just create something rough so that we can talk about it. Let's see. I might do like a points from volume. How's everybody going out there? So I might do a little points from volume, and then I'm going to... Actually, what I might do is do like a little grain simulation or something. Let's do a Vellum grain source. Vellum configured grain. And create points from volume. The reason I would do that over a points from volume is just... tornado. Cool. I have actually done a tornado. If you have a look back in the stream list, the VFX playlist, you will see early on I did a tornado. And there are lots of different ways that you can do tornadoes, and maybe if we have time later I can show you some simple stuff that you could use to get started. Yeah, look, you're only in intro, so just yeah, baby steps. You could do it with particles to start with. I think that's how I did a tornado a long time ago when I was learning. I think I started with particles, and then you can progress as you learn more. Alright, so the reason I did a Vellum constraints grain rather than just a points from volume is that it sets it up correctly where none of the spheres will be overlapping. So no matter what size I choose here, you can see how those sphere sizes resize. And that just means that nothing will be intersecting or overlapping when we get to the simulation. So I'm going to just put down a Vellum solver now, and let's see what we can do with this. So we'll plug that in. And then let's just test, make sure it's working. I'm just going to move this up above the ground plane. And hopefully we'll have gravity on by default. Yeah. So. Okay. Grain sim. Cool. I don't want it really to be falling. I'm going to do something a bit more interesting. So I'm going to take it down to just world 0. And then I'm going to use the force output here. So double clicking inside the Vellum solver takes me to this, and I can put a pop force here, and I'm just going to add some noise. So we get this kind of cool thing happening. Maybe it's a little much. Maybe take the swell size down. Get some kind of cool stuff happening like that. Now, I don't actually know if you can do it with this Vellum solver. I suspect that it might be a little difficult, but let's try. I'm going to... here we go. So it says, yeah, I want to do this, like the Vellum constraint stuff. So it looks like I can just wire it into force. It doesn't really say exactly. It says source to add new geometry. So I guess I'll do it into this one. I'm going to use a Vellum constraints node. And I'm going to try to dynamically create constraints between these points. So let's see what we can do. Maybe a glue constraint? Jump out. Let's see if we can visualize constraints. Let's just turn all this stuff on and see if we get some constraints being created. Doesn't look like it. Let's go in. Let's change group type to points. Points. We've got this search distance as well. And I don't know if we need to feed this a group, but maybe if I just put star star in here. I think I can see, well, you can see that it's not really moving as much. And I think I can see some little lines in here. Let's go wireframe. There we go. So we're getting some constraints being created now, which is kind of cool. So, hey Fatty, thank you very much. I think, did I see on the Houdini Facebook group that you had done a surfacing video? I think it was you. I think it looked really cool. But thank you for that. I'm always interested to see what people do, you know, with some of this stuff that I'm talking about, because I don't really get to resolve these things into anything particularly nice in the 2 hours that I have these streams. So it's always kind of cool to you know, to see what you guys come up with. Where's my chat? There. Okay, so yeah, you can kind of see some constraints being made, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to up the search distance a little bit and hope that we get more being made. And the other thing I want to do is set this to each frame so that it dynamically adds constraints, you know, as this is solving. So, you know, when two particles get within a certain range of each other, hopefully they'll connect to each other, and that might make for interesting stuff as well. So let's see. Max search distance 0.3, constraints per object, so we could have multiple constraints per object if we want. Right at the start, we're going to get a lot of constraints. So what I'm going to do is, let me turn this off and see how my sim goes. So maybe what I'll do is start my constraints from a bit later. Once this has had time to evolve and, you know, get away from that sort of start position, I'm going to, you know, maybe let's do greater than 60 on this guy here. So right at the top, we could do activation $F greater than 60. And then we'll see those constraints kick on at a certain time. There we go. And the other thing we might want to do is like create a group. Maybe, you know, we don't want all these particles being constrained together. Maybe we just want certain collections of particles to be constrained together. I don't know. You can see them being dynamically created. You see this one appear up here. Just there. Big long one. Let's try maybe playing with the search distance. Let's go 0.5. Constraints 2. I'll push my noise a little bit harder now that we've got those constraints in there. Hey, cool. Yeah, look, Vellum is... I really like Vellum, you know, it's kind of one of the easier effect things in Houdini, you know. It's reasonably straightforward. I mean, there's certainly some you know, kind of complex things that you can do with it. But, you know, to get to this point, it was pretty easy, and it's kind of, there's some cool things going on, which, you know, I think we could create some interesting, you know, you can imagine that was some sort of molecular simulation or something. Could be kind of cool. So let's zoom in. This is very similar to something I've been working on. You know, it's very simple, but I think in terms of how you present something like this, you know, you can do a lot with it. I'm hoping to get some kind of like strings, some string shapes in here. I'm wondering maybe I'll create a group first in my source. So maybe out here after my grain creation, I'm gonna do an attribute VOP. Can you guys hear that music? It's maybe a bit loud. I don't know. Turn it up a little bit. It's kind of weird. Let's go pause. So I'm just creating a noise, basically a color noise here, and I'm going to just use this to drive some groups. So fit range. Using a fit like this after a one-dimensional noise, it's like, you know, if you've ever done any image processing, it's like adding contrast. Basically, you can crush the image, the colors, to produce different results, kind of like doing levels or something. Hey Shrihari, yes, it is very similar. Like the constraints that are being created there, they are primitive connections between points, and it is very similar to the way that the connect adjacent pieces works. You're correct. Hey Mitchell, how's it going? Hi Ula, I'm just gonna call you Ula. I'm doing, I don't really have much of a plan today, but I'm in Vellum now. I'm doing some like grain simulations, abstract grain simulations with Vellum in Houdini. And then a little bit later, so I'm doing this so that I can talk about sort of rendering techniques with small scale effects in Houdini. So, you know, looking at depth of field, looking at shaders, talking about ways to create variance, and we'll get there, but that's my goal. Sort of more, I guess, more abstract motion graphics-y type stuff than what I usually do. So I don't know. Let's say that we need to test it, but let's say that is what we'll be doing. Let's make a group, and we'll just say at cd.x greater than 0. Choose points, and then we should see, we have wireframe. You can see how just those white areas have been selected. So the yellow areas are the selections. So just those white areas. Okay, and let's call this constraint group. Go to our glue. Hey, no worries, no worries. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining. So I'm going to choose constraint group, and then I don't know if I really need target geometry in there. Let's see. No, it still works without target geometry. So now you can see the white ones are being constrained, but the black ones are not. So that's a way to kind of control things a little bit. And now we have a little bit of color variance as well, which is interesting. Now I'm just going to play around with these settings. So I'm going to go B1. Now noise is a little bit crazy now as well, so I'm just going to turn it down. Oh, the other thing we could do with our noise is maybe just apply it to the white areas. Let's try scroll down, use Vex, and I'm not gonna sometimes I look over here for suggested ones, which can be useful, but I'm just going to hover over here, find the parameter name, which is amp, and I'm going to say amp times equals at cd.x, and let's see. Here you go. See how just the white areas now? It's like basically working as a mask. So our amplitude is still being set to 0.2, but that 0.2 is now being multiplied by these color values. So the white ones you can see, and now I'm starting to get those strings, which is cool. The white ones you can see are being disturbed or pushed the most. The black ones are still floating in the air. They're probably being pushed by the other white ones around them. But you can see that they're not really moving anywhere near as much. So that's kind of cool. I'm liking this. This is like it's like a solar flare or something. Let's have a look at this on this side. And I'm getting these kind of strings of lines now, which is cool. So I don't know, you know, there's some interesting things going on here. Let's just do a quick play blast. So flipbook with new settings. Yep. Now what I'm trying to determine now is just speed of this thing. It may be moving too quick for what I want, but I can always slow it down after the fact. Yeah, it's maybe a little fast. Probably don't need it for 240 frames, that's a lot. Let's see. Ah, it's not too bad. You know, after the simulation I can always put a time shift down and just retime this, you know, retime this thing to whatever I want. Because the point number isn't changing, you can kind of, you know, make this as slow-mo as you like. So what I do is turn off integer frames, do $FF for float frame. That gives me the half frames, whole, you know, not just the whole frames. And then I can divide it by a number, let's say 24. So you can see now on frame 63, I'm actually reading frame 2.625. And we should see, as I scrub, so maybe that's, yeah, maybe that's a little slow. By the end, I'm only at frame 10. So, you know, let's go divided by 4. And you can see now it's moving super slow. But what I could do here is also do a time offset. So I could do, make sure you turn off integer frames as well. $F, let's do $F plus 100. That means that kind of this is my starting point now, and then from there it's just going to be like a sort of small amount of that. So from, you know, we start at 100 and it no longer displays now where we were kind of up to, but you know, it's going to be sort of, well, 100 plus 60 frames, so we're only ending up kind of, I guess, from 100 to 160, which is going to be here. So we're just dealing with that much range now. Gets a bit confusing when you do this time stuff, but it's really handy to be able to retime your simulations like this. So let's do another flipbook. Coffee time. It's nice and light simulation, so it's not taking too long. Ah, can you see this? There's some stepping occurring here. That doesn't look too good. You see that stepping? It's something is not interpolating correctly here. I need to just investigate. It could have been because I did this $FF. Ah, see that? See that little change of movement there? Now let's do another flipbook. It's looking a little better. Let's see, right at the start. Aha, nice and smooth. So when you're doing any type of retiming, you need to. I thought that probably would have been okay, but I guess it's not. You need to use the float frame variable. rather than the whole frame variable. Integer frames must be ticked off as well, because as you can see when I tick that on, they move back to that whole frame position. So you have to make sure that you always use that. Okay, cool. So now we've got this smoothly interpolating sim. And yeah, it's pretty simple, but sometimes simple things are what you need. And let's choose a camera angle. So I'm going to kind of do something like this. New camera. I'm going to go view. I'm going to play with the aperture and focal length to get a bit of sort of, because we're, you know, it's really small scale, I want to sort of oversell the depth. So you can see when I take the focal length down, oops, broke my camera. Need to make sure the lock is on when I do this. So you can see when I, you know, when the focal length and aperture are at 50, which they are by default, the depth is kind of true, you know, it's very kind of one-to-one. But as you bring the focal length down, you can see it zooms out. It's like creating a wide-angle lens. As I push back in, that depth becomes much more accentuated, where I can push really close to some of these foreground spheres, but it keeps those other ones kind of further away. And if I have a really small focal length, you can see how exaggerated that becomes, where I've got this, oops, where I've got this huge, you know, sphere in the foreground. Just, oops, undo a bit. Screw that camera. There we go. So I've got these, you know, exaggerated scale in the foreground, but then these look really far away. So you can really play with that kind of idea of depth by messing with the focal length of the camera. And this, you know, this is gonna help kind of make this simple simulation much more interesting. So let's just have a little check. Mitchell, could you add the 100 to the original time shift instead of having 2? Yes, you could. The reason I like to have 2 is so that it keeps it a little bit easier to kind of just tell where things are happening. Like, I will quite often do this just for workflow and ease of disabling things. Like, you know, this one is called my retime, let's say, and this one is called my offset. And if I was to pass this off to somebody in a studio and they open this up, very easily they can see that there are two things going on here. There's an offset going on and a retime going on. But if I embed that in one whole expression, it's going to take longer, and potentially someone might miss it because it's embedded in there. But it also becomes harder to go, well, actually I want to take the offset off, or I want to just change the retime. It becomes harder to do that. So I'm in the habit of kind of simplifying things a little bit more, breaking them down into different nodes for usability and also clarity of file. Well, that's right, Fatty. The curve line is kind of guiding the eye. That you're right, and that is those sort of choices are kind of I guess what I want to say, subconscious. You know, I'm subconsciously choosing a good framing of this, of this simulation, where you're right. You can see that. Kind of, it's a classic thing they talk about in art, that serpentine curve, that sort of curving path leading into the distance, leading the eye somewhere. And I think about those things subconsciously, but, I'm always using my artistic eye to choose a good kind of camera angle and a good layout that works and that will kind of show this stuff off in a really interesting and nice, nice light, nice presentation. And that stuff just comes from practice, but it also comes from studying things like art and and making art. So and understanding depth and and how you know, how things will kind of look when they're presented on screen. I kind of think I might want a little more offset here, which is, you know, handy. I have it separated. I think that section of the simulation works a little better. Now this is something you want to avoid, is spheres hitting the camera, so I'm just gonna pull back a little bit. Now you could always come up with something to stop those from doing that once you decided on a camera angle. Maybe that's something we need to do, but sometimes it's easier just to move your camera a little bit. There we go. So let's just do a little flipbook of this. It's important, I mean, that's horrible to look at, but it's important to do this constantly, flipbooking and checking your animation, checking the speed of things, making sure that nothing is kind of going wrong, there's no weird stuff going on. It's interesting, it looks like the camera is actually moving through space, but it's not. So it's kind of cool depth thing, I guess, because everything's expanding towards us. It makes it feel like our camera's sort of traveling through, which is kind of cool. Alright, so let's say that, you know, I'm happy with that simulation. I'm just going to quickly save this, just in case, you know, you never know. Wait for my hard drives to wake up. Let's call this macro shot. Okay, so what am I going to do? Let's create an environment layer, and we'll start looking at rendering this stuff. Doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Maybe I'll add a few things in later to help sell the shot. Now I've got some HDRIs here that are quite nice for this sort of stuff, and this stuff is from Polyhaven or HDRI Haven, and these are just studio lighting environments. So if you have a look at what this is, it's just a photo studio. I can't really show you terribly well. It's just a photo studio with photo lighting. So, you know, sometimes this stuff works really well for product-y type shots. Let's just check it out. Go to the camera, hit render. Cool. Looking at this and the distortion of the spheres, and this is not something that I see in the viewport because I'm using sprites to display these spheres, but I was not seeing that distortion, which I don't really like. So I might kind of I might fix that or change it, so you can see how all the spheres look perfectly spherical. It's because they're in the Vellum, way back in the Vellum constraints grain, there is a sprite material that is getting created to display them, but that does not distort in the viewport. It keeps it always perfectly round. So let's delete that. Attribute delete, and where is it? Oh, here it is. Detail, is it this one? GL sphere points, there we go. And I'm going to copy the points. Yeah, okay. Shahari, let me talk about that a little bit, about how to choose a HDRI. So I'm just going to do this first, create a sphere. I'm going to make it a primitive and then copy it on, and now we can see that distortion, which doesn't really look that nice. So let's just go back and adjust our camera, make sure I'm not still rendering. Let's just turn our lights off as well. There we go. So yeah, I think my focal length was just a little bit too crazy, pull my camera back now. You can see it's really, let me just see where I am. Oh, you know what? I think this sphere by default. Yeah, it's annoying they do this in 19 now. The radius of the sphere, when you put a sphere down, and there's two, sphere primitive, I guess is not, but sphere create is set to 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 for some reason. I don't know why. Revert to defaults. There we go. Okay. Looks a bit better. Choose a good camera angle again. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's a little bit different to what we had. Can adjust this again a little bit. Whoa. So, hey Alan, how's it going? Yeah, I'm doing okay now. If you missed the start, I had COVID, so I was off for a few weeks. But I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah, that's right, Fatty. It's because of the wide angle. There are two versions of every primitive object now. How do you mean? I mean, it does look like they're in pairs, but I don't think there are two. Oh, maybe there are. That's, you're right, I think. Maybe? I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on there. No, look, there are 2 points there. I don't know why I can't see that one. Maybe it's just like really light grey. But, I think that's right. Yeah, it does kind of look like they're in pairs, but, I think it's still the same. Yeah, we can test just by switching, so you can see. Oh, with Houdini 19. Ah, right. Yeah, it is annoying as well, because you're like, well, which one am I choosing now? The annoying thing for me is when I want to do a scatter. And there's a scale in here now, so my muscle memory just does SCA and hits enter, and I get a scale every time. Super annoying. All right, let's go back, choose a good frame, try and render it. Render. So Shahari, how to choose a good HDRI map? I mean, it depends what you're rendering, really. So, you know, that's a big part of it. But, thanks, Alan. You know, HDRI Haven, or Polyhaven, as it's known. Let's see if I can pull it up here. There we go. HDRIs. The most useful thing, I mean, you know, I'm choosing it based on the kind of mood that I want to set for my scene. So if I'm doing an outdoor something, I'll look for an outdoor environment. And, you know, with the sky or whatever, if I'm trying to do something in a landscape. You can see this is something similar to what I'm using here. The way that I judge which HDRI I'm going to use is by these bottom spheres here. So this is the cool thing about Polyhaven, is that, you know, you can see how this is going to render. So, you know, let's just click on one. They display the rendered version. You know, these spheres have been rendered with this HDRI, so you can see exactly how it's going to look on a white shader. You can see the shadows, sharp shadows, the direction that those shadows are, you know, getting cast from the sun. The reflection of a chrome ball, the reflection of a kind of plastic and glass, and the refractions. So that's what I use to kind of judge how my render is going to turn out from a particular HDRI. You can see these ones here, you know, this sunset. It's got some interesting colors, so it adds a bit of interest to the white, but it also doesn't have a directional shadow, which is kind of useful. You know, it's useful when you maybe want to add your own sunlight in. Hey Eric, I don't have much of a concept today. I mean, this is loosely based on something that I was kind of working on. It's an abstract kind of grain simulation, and I'm using it for the purposes of illustrating some rendering techniques and composition framing. But yeah, it's kind of like a motion graphics-y type simulation. Nothing real world about it necessarily. You could use this for like I don't know, opening credits of some movie or something. So yeah, Shahari, I think, you know, that's what I use to judge. Yeah, and quite often I will choose one that doesn't have a obvious directional shadow, because I might want to put in my own custom sunlight, and then if I've got two directional shadows, they'll be fighting against each other. Yeah, Eric, cool. I mean, hopefully it'll turn out well. But it, like, a simple scene like this, you know, it didn't take me very long to create the effect, but like, you can do a lot with it in terms of the rendering. So I'm copying spheres here to this. I'm rendering those spheres. You can actually just render points. So have a look at this. My scene view is this now, and I'm rendering this object here, which is just points. Oh, you don't have a scale node. That's interesting. I'm on one prior, or I'm on the previous one, I think. Maybe they're more in between. I'm on 3.8.3. I do need to upgrade, because there are some bugs in this version which I asked to be fixed, which they have been fixed now, which is great. Around camera projection. The camera projection would break when you were projecting textures. The background image would shrink, which was really bad. But you don't have a scale node. That's interesting. I wonder why. You're doing it inside of the object context, I'm assuming. I don't know what it is. What is it? Layout brush scale. Maybe they changed the name because people complained about it. So yeah, you can see I don't actually need to copy spheres onto these points for them to render as spheres, which is cool. It happens at render time anyway. So this is useful for visualizing in the viewport, but it's not necessary for rendering, which is cool. Eric, any cool projects I'm working on at the moment? Yeah, I can't really talk about stuff. I mean, I'm not working on any film projects at the moment. I have been doing some freelance stuff every now and then, but nothing much I can talk about, unfortunately. Mostly, I've been working on the course for CG Spectrum and creating content, creating interesting shots. Yeah, maybe Transformers, yeah. Transformers 753. I've been taking some of the things. I don't know if you guys saw the pirate ship one that I did with the Kit Bash pirate ship. I've been taking that and trying to turn it into something cool to be used as either a tutorial piece or a project that we can kind of give out to students here at CG Spectrum, and they can use it to add their own effects. So we've got an animator who's animating some tentacles, because my tentacles were just kind of stand-in rubbish tentacles. But yeah, that's been my focus. I'm trying to develop really cool film quality content now for for our CG Spectrum courses. Alright, so this is looking okay. It's looking a little dark. I'm going to give this a shader now, because that is going to kind of transform things. I can just drag that directly onto the render, which is cool. I'm going to set my base color to white, and that will give me the full luminance of my point colors. So I'm using point color here, and setting that to white will just give me exactly the point color. You can see I'm getting some nicer reflections now as well, which is cool. I haven't noticed that. I haven't noticed that about the camera, Mitchell. Have to have a play with it. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there have been some bugs and things in 19, and they have been fixing them, which is good. You know, and if you ever discover a bug in Houdini, you should report it to them so that they can investigate it and potentially fix it. Yeah, they tell you that, oh, we don't know when it's going to be fixed exactly, but they fixed my bug that I had, which was a significant one because it would affect everybody working in film who does camera projections, projecting textures on things or projecting the footage onto geometry, which is a common technique. It would have affected everyone, so, you know, they jumped on it and fixed it, which is awesome. Okay, so, you know, now we can see some interesting things. So it's getting a lot of darkness here, which, you know, is because all this stuff is black, but we're getting some interesting things. If I set the roughness to 0, we'll get, like, really chrome reflections. If I turn off the point color and set it to all black, we get this kind of cool look, which is just pure reflection, which I sometimes like to look at just to see what the reflections are doing. And this is kind of similar to looking at that chrome ball of the on the Polyhaven site. Just so I can render this stuff a bit faster, I'm going to go to my rendering tab, set my pixel samples to 1, and you can see that now just whips through really quickly, which is cool. So, you know, this HDRI is okay. I actually have this in a different format, which is blurred. So what I did was I took this into Nuke and blurred it, just applied a blur node. And what you can see that does is removes the details, but kind of keeps the lighting. Okay, so that's another blurred one. So I've got 2 blurred versions. Here's the non-blurred version. So you can see here, I can basically see like all the bits of the studio. Sometimes you don't want to see that. You don't want to see super crisp reflections. So the first one I did was this, which is sort of subtly blurred. So you can see that still gives me the lighting, but the details are kind of blurred. And it sort of subdues the lighting a little bit too. I can always crank it up with the intensity. So you can see I can still see a little bit of detail, some bits on the floor or whatever those are, I don't know. Oh, actually, they are actually other spheres here. So I did another version which is even more blurred, and you'll see that that becomes, you know, it sort of gets rid of even the hot spots, the really hot areas. You can see they're in there, but they're just really knocked back now. And you can see that that gives quite an interesting look to the render. You know, you get much more ambient sort of stuff happening. Now, the next thing that I would be doing here is trying to determine which is the best angle for this light, because there are lights in this HDRI, so if I have a look at it, turn my light intensity down for a second, sort of rotate around, you can see, you know, there are, this is, let's have a look at the non-blurred version, just so we can sort of try to tell what's going on here. So this is the photography backdrop, and then we've got some lights shooting on that, and then we've got 2 big lights here, which are basically illuminating the front of our object because our camera is here. But we can rotate this around to get different effects. So if I hit render, go to transform, and then start rotating this around. So the middle one is Y, it rotates around the Y axis. You don't really want to rotate it off axis. Let's turn it back up. 5, I think is what we had. Oh, and this is our non-blurred one as well, but that's okay. So, you know, I usually just rotate in large values. And so you can see that I lost my rim light there, which I kind of wasn't liking anyway. So that's kind of nice to get rid of. Maybe let's do 45. And sometimes the reflection, you know, is not the best thing to look at when you're doing lights as well, so you may just want to set it to color turn off your reflection and just look at the pure diffuse. And what that's telling me is that my light is just too bright as well when I look at just the diffuse. So I'm going to turn that down now. There we go. And this helps me determine, you know, where the shadows are going to be, where the lighting is, where the light's coming from, the direction a little easier. So, you know, you can see at 0, see how the center of these spheres is really white? So we've got, and we're not getting too many shadows through here. So we've got lights kind of right on the front, like what we saw. If I was to rotate at 180, we'll see now that the front is kind of in more shadow. Let's do like 120. So now you can see the light kind of on this side here. So you can sort of, I don't know, you know, it's worth playing with the rotation of the HDRI to get something that, you know, that works well for you. Now you can see it's sort of, let's do a little less, 250. You can see a bit more sort of lighting coming from the side. I don't know if these HDRIs are kind of the best. They're sort of, they do have light coming from every sort of direction, which, you know, sometimes isn't the best. But this is just the HDRI as well. We are going to add other lights, so, you know, I'm only using this as a kind of fill light, really. It's going to give me some interesting reflections. Black block grids. Yeah, right. So, yeah, absolutely. You could put some blockers in there. Yes, Mitchell, there is a way to do that. I think if I use a sprite, maybe. Let's see. Let's see if I can do that. Sometimes what I'll do to grab a sprite material, a sphere sprite material, because sprite here usually comes in with like a smoke puff, and I can never seem to find the correct sprite material. I think it's in here somewhere. Sphere deep, I think it is, but I feel like when I do this it doesn't work. Let's try it. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Oh, there we go. So there's our spheres. Oh, I wonder... I feel like I did solve this issue once. And now I've forgotten. So you do have this geometry tab here. Render points as spheres, render points as circles. Treat point scale as diameter instead of radius. Yeah, I wonder. I feel like I did solve that problem, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I did. Let's see what this does. Control sprites for all points. Hit stop render. It's a good question. No point rendering. What happens if I did that? Well. Yeah, I don't know. Not sure. Not sure about that. I'm sure there's probably a way. But, doesn't seem like you can do it like this. Yeah, I don't know. Have to play around with that. I feel like I did work that out, and no, I don't know why. I'm gonna set my view flag here, and I'm gonna just put my my render flag there. Control click. So, what have I got? I've got that, my environment light. Let's put in some other lights now. So I'm gonna put in something from kind of over here, I think. Area light. I'm gonna turn off my environment light for now. and I'm going to, oh, that's okay. I thought I broke my camera. And I'm going to just render with these area lights and see what I can get going just with the area lights. And then at the end, I'll turn on my environment light back as my kind of fill. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. I'm going to up the area size, and what that'll give me is a kind of more diffused light. Less, you can see when I have the area size down, it gives me more of a kind of point light look with kind of sharper kind of highlights and sharper shadows, but as I increase my area size, it softens all that. It looks a little bit more realistic as well. You have to be careful with area lights because they introduce noise. So yeah, it's something that you need to be mindful of. So if I turn on my environment light now, and maybe turn it down, so it is just working as a sort of fill, then I can see my highlight from my area light here, and then my environment light is just filling in the rest. One really good thing to do when you're setting up lighting is to go to your images, extra image planes, and turn on a extra plane and choose direct lighting or combined lighting per light. What that does is turns on this light exports, export variable for each light, and the render doesn't change. But if I go to my view bar, I can look at my lights individually, so I can see which light is contributing, and then I can, you know, sort of go jump between the two, jump between environment light and see, just to see what is the contribution of each light. It's really handy to work out, you know, if your environment light is even doing anything or whether it's worth having there. Okay, so it's not too bad. Let's go back and look at our environment light again. I'll just crank that up a little bit. Whoa, too much. Okay, so this area here is kind of getting a little bit too illuminated. One thing I could try with that is to use attenuation. So at the moment, this is set to physically correct attenuation. I can actually turn on the ramp and set an end distance so that my light attenuates where I want it to. You can start to see it here, where I'm just getting light here, and then the rest of it is falling off. So this ramp is controlling the fall off of my light based on distance. The motion blur actually is not happening at the moment. I don't think I have motion blur turned on. By default, it is off. I think it just looks, maybe it looks like it because of the stretching of the spheres. It does feel like it's in motion, but if I turn this on and I have to make sure that I have velocity blur turned on, then we'll see it. You know, you can see it now. It's a little bit noisier, not quite as smooth, but absolutely, that's another thing we could turn on. All right, so now you can see with this attenuation that I have that the light is not hitting here anymore. So I can keep playing with the ramp end distance. There you go, I can see it getting hit there now, and I can see these, but I can actually play with this color ramp and pull that in a little bit. And now I've got some kind of bright light over here, and it falls off to not being as intense back here. You can even do things like this, where you have the light being not as intense at the start. Might need to play with this ramp a little bit. Not as intense at the start, so there you go, you can see. It's kind of a little hard to tell what's going on there, but you can see the intensity is actually now starting off 0 and increasing in this sort of mid-range, and then falling off again. And that can be a really interesting thing to play with. It kind of, when you're trying to get light in specific areas, I find that this attenuation kind of is a really cool way to just focus the light on a particular zone. I'm going to try something now with the shader where just to see what this looks like, because I might want to have some subsurface on my model. I'm going to set that to 1. I'm going to set it to single scattering. And then we can kind of see what the subsurface is doing with these lights, because subsurface requires lights to scatter the light through. If you look at what subsurface is actually doing under the hood, it's creating a volume at render time, which is kind of cool. And it's scattering light through that volume. So you can imagine, with no other components on here, you can imagine that that does look like a volume with light scattering through it. So that looks kind of cool. You know, having the light behind, which is the reason why I put that area light back there. Having a light behind is a really good way of scattering light through from behind, and it really accentuates that SSS look. Whereas if you have a light on the front, or not from behind, the SSS kind of doesn't really look that nice. Now we can turn on the reflection again as well, just to see, you know, some SSS with reflection. You can see that there is my area light reflecting. Now here's another cool thing that you can do. Contributions with your light. You can actually choose which component your light is affecting. So this area light, I'm not really digging this highlight here that it's giving me. I'm going to turn this on, choose reflect, and then turn it off. It's a kind of weird way that it works. But you'll see now, it's still contributing the light for the SSS, but it's no longer contributing that reflection, which I wasn't really enjoying. So that is a really cool way of being very specific about how your light is affecting your scene. I could even add another one. So the way to do it is to add it and then turn it off. So I could turn off diffuse as well. Not that I'm seeing any diffuse in here, but now it's really only going to be affecting the SSS contribution, and if I had refraction it would affect that, which I could turn off. But yeah, it's really cool. You know, you could have multiple lights affecting different things. And to get very specific looks, it's really, really handy. Now, there's a big kind of area of darkness down here, which I'm not loving. So I'm going to go and come sort of around here, maybe a little bit behind or in front, sort of around where the camera is, and click another one in there. See what that gives me. Okay, so we can see it reflecting because it has that reflection contribution. We can check it out here. Area Light 2 is the new one. So we can just look at that component and see what it's giving us. And I should have taken a snapshot of my previous render, which is something that I do as well, so that I can compare, you know, what the previous render looked like without that light. I am liking some of what this is doing, but not totally. It's giving me some interesting illumination in this area, which we didn't have before. So I'm going to take a snapshot of that and then turn this one off, so that we can compare what we had. There you go, you can see it's very dark now. In comparison, that is much more interesting. But yeah, it needs some work. I might swing it around a little more. Okay, so I'll just take a snapshot of that. Doesn't matter that it's just partial. I'm going to swing it around, maybe pull back a little bit. Try again. Turn it on. Oh. You know, this is a really important part of, you know, any shot, whether it's a big effect shot or a little, you know, effect shot. Spending time with the lighting and rendering, it can really make a huge difference. You know, I could spend a whole day working on lighting for an effect that, you know, it yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can very easily just go put some lights in, slap it in, and send it off, and go, okay, it's done. You know, my effect is cool. That's all there is to it. But if you don't spend the time doing this, you know, no matter how cool your effect is, it's going to be let down by some average lighting. So it is really worthwhile putting in the time to kind of get this right, even if it takes you all day or all week, whatever. You know, in a studio context, you might not have a week to work on it, but you know, it's really worth putting in the time, doing lots of tests, and kind of getting it right before you send it off. Present it as best you can, get the most out of it. Because you could have the coolest kind of details in the world in your explosion sim or your debris or destruction, and if you've got, you know, really kind of average lighting that makes everything look flat, and, you know, it's just, what's the point? You wasted all that really cool stuff. Alright, contributions. I'm going to turn off the reflection again because I'm not liking those reflections that I'm getting. And I'm going to crank it up a little bit. It was actually better before. Swing it back around. Maybe let's try a bit more that way. And again, attenuation, you know, I can control how much of this is going to affect. Maybe I just want it to affect this bottom section and not the top, so using attenuation to control that might be a cool thing to do. And we're still getting, you know, areas, it kind of looks like these are different colors, but they're all just white. We are still getting tonal variation in there, which is cool. So let's do this. Set that to 2. We can see that fall off now at the top. Some people export their Houdini as Limbic and render it in Cinema 4D. Well, look, to be honest, I wouldn't do that, because I'm not a Cinema 4D artist. I think, you know, some people really like certain renderers, and they might want to stick to doing that. In my opinion, I think if you're committed to Houdini, you probably wouldn't do that. You would just find a decent renderer that works in Houdini, because it's kind of an annoying step to have to export everything, and frequently there can be problems in export. You can lose data, or things just don't work. Houdini is really good at handling all kinds of geometry and all kinds of crazy things. As soon as you start getting into exporting stuff, then you realize that other softwares kind of aren't built the same way that Houdini is. And I don't know about Cinema, maybe Cinema can handle things a little better, but Maya certainly really sucks at handling anything that's kind of a little bit odd, or the geometry is a bit kind of weird, or has some errors. Houdini can just handle all that stuff. So personally, I wouldn't be doing that. I would just be kind of learning how to render in Houdini, and then finding a renderer that works well for you. If Mantra is too slow, which it is for most people, then find a GPU renderer that works. There's plenty out there that work with Houdini. They're the same ones mainly that work with Cinema as well. You've got Octane, I believe you can use that with Houdini. You've got 3 to Light, it's really good. Redshift, there's tons. V-Ray, there's all sorts. Maya sucks at anything, full stop. I agree. I'm not a Maya fan. Okay. You know, this could be better, but it's not too bad. Now, I'm thinking I might change the camera angle, because what I'm going to look at now is depth of field. And looking at this, you know, this area around here, I reckon, would be my focus, and that's going to fall off. But I think the camera at the moment is not going to work great for that. So I might try and just get more of this stuff in the background. Maybe something like that. Let's see how this plays. I might have screwed my camera intersections there. I got something going through the camera, but I think this might work a little better for depth of field. Let me catch up. Alan says, I really like Mantra. I agree. Mantra is still my favorite. It's slow, but it works well. It looks good. The thing I love about Mantra is that it's fully integrated into Houdini, and it doesn't require me to like rethink the way that I'm working or rebuild shaders. It just sort of fully integrates, takes all the attributes that I need, and you know, I don't have to think about it too much. That's right, Jono. I mean, Houdini absolutely can compete with Katana, and people do use Houdini as purely a lighting and kind of scene assembly tool, like what Katana is used for, where you just bring assets in and use it to light, and you can use whatever third-party renderer you want. Look, I think, Shahari, if you have experience with cinema, then you can, by all means, you know, do that stuff. I think when you're starting out, whatever it takes to get something rendered is completely fine. I mean, I switched from 3D Studio Max to Houdini a long time ago, and I held on to Max as a kind of crutch for a number of years. But eventually, I just kind of, you know, I stopped needing it, and I let it go. Let it go off into the forest, and you know, yeah, you know, that's fine. When you're starting out, if you know cinema, then you know, by all means, utilize it. But I think it is good at a certain point to go, okay, I need to just figure out how to make this work in Houdini. I have tried Karma Mitchell. I actually kind of like it, and I could, you know, I could have a look at this in Karma as well. The thing I don't like about it is that I have to rebuild this entire context in the stage context. And I hope one day they don't make me do that, and I can just render it like this in the out context, because I find that a really annoying step. I don't know. I have been kind of impressed with how it works though, and the look of it. I don't know if I have. See if I can find it. Where would it be? Stream. I rendered out the Kitbash, the Kitbash project I was working on. Let's see. I think I rendered this in Karma. So this was from the stream, you know, with my stupid tentacle. This was from the stream, you know, a little while back. And I rendered this in Karma. And I was actually impressed. You can see this flickering on the boat. I used the denoiser to, you know, denoise, obviously. I used pretty low-res settings, but I applied the denoiser, which does create these artifacts. But it gives a, you know, nice crisp render apart from that. So, yeah, you know, I was pretty impressed with that. You can render it in the out context. Yeah, maybe I need to look more into it. I think you still need to set stuff up in the stage context if you want to use Karma though, right? Maybe? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah, so this boat, just while we're talking about that, so, you know, I did this kind of scene in the stream, and then I'm turning it into this project for the course, which is kind of like, yeah, I mean, this is just blocking. Obviously, it doesn't have the doesn't have the destruction or anything, and we're still working on it with animation and cameras and stuff, but I added sort of light, like rain and, you know, fog and stuff, and waves. We'll do a full kind of wave simulation. But I think this will be really cool, you know, and we can apply all those things that I was looking at with the stream and all the shattering stuff. At the moment, the shattering is kind of, it just gets pulled down below the water, but I want to try and make that a little bit more interesting. So yeah, you know, Karma, definitely, it's worth experimenting with, but I don't like the way it's integrated at the moment. Yeah, Solaris is not something I've looked into that much, Jono. I mean, yeah, it definitely, for a scene assembly and kind of lighting pipeline, it definitely seems interesting. For me, it doesn't really have any relevance as an effects artist, but yeah. Absolutely, Shrihari. It is difficult. You know, it will take time to kind of get used to. So, you know, you just need to practice, be patient. You know, we'll kind of all start to come together eventually. All right. So I'm going to start looking at depth of field. Now I'm going to choose my camera and right-click on it and use the focus handle. And this is how you set your depth of field. So all the way back here, this square is the focus point. And you can see, as I adjust that, it also adjusts this focus distance. So you can also do it through here, but it's much more user-friendly to do it in the viewport. And I can actually set that to where I want. So, you know, if I want it to be right up close to the camera here, I can do that. And then this is my f-stop, which is going to be sort of how blurry, how tight that depth of field is. You can see if I do that, it's going to be really tight focus, and then everything else is going to be blurry. But if I open it right up, you know, that depth of field, or that blurriness, is going to be less. So I'm going to do something like that. Set it quite shallow, but, you know, open enough. Let's just see what it looks like. Why not hit save? It's been a while. Enable depth of field. Yeah, I don't know, Mitchell. I'm not sure. We can test it. We can test it later. Let's see. So you can see the depth of field is adding a little something. It's hard to see with such low pixel samples, but it is blurring this scene a little bit. So let's just increase our pixel samples, and I'm going to take the resolution of my render down and increase my pixel samples. This will produce a crisper render, but hopefully still not take as long because I'm rendering at half size. So let's see. I'll do it with depth of field and then without, and we can compare. But you can see this softness that it's kind of adding. Our focus point should be around here somewhere. Well, there are two different ways to approach it, Shrihari. I think, yes, absolutely, that is a technique that I use all the time. It doesn't always look the best, though, to do it in comp. So I was going to mention that. But, yeah, sometimes, and quite often, I have clients that will request 3D depth of field, because it does look better. It looks more realistic. Sometimes, especially when you have lots of objects overlapping each other, and depending on what's going on in the background as well, the 2D depth of field that you can apply in comp, it doesn't layer as nicely, but doing it in 3D, you're going to get, you know, really kind of nice photographic type of depth of field. So let's just take a photo of that and turn it off. We can kind of compare the difference. Sharpness. This render is going to be a little soft anyway, just because of the half-res nature of it. But hopefully we'll see a difference. You can do it with deep as well, but again, I think you're still going to end up with the same issues as doing it with a Z depth pass in comp as well. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, deep might be better, I'm not sure, but you still get the occlusion from the camera, so you're still going to potentially get edge kind of issues with overlapping stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I agree. Doing depth of field in post often is really kind of good, and it's obviously quick and easy to adjust. But yeah, it doesn't always look the best. Okay, so yeah, this depth of field at the moment is pretty subtle. I see it. Yeah, I can see it just very subtly changing those pixels back there. It's really hard to see what it's doing, but it's not really doing much in the foreground. So let's take our f-stop down. So go and have a look at it again. Look at my focus handle. There we go. Just, you can see that f-stop coming down, so let's just do like really shallow. Okay, take a snapshot of it. Turn it back on. What is going on with this music? Skip that. So let's have a look. Yeah, there we go. We can see it blurring much more now. Even the foreground is getting blurry. And this one, you can see it really blurring now. We can compare the two. I mean, we're doing it in 3D. We can compare it with the post one as well. Well, you can always watch it back, Showreel. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of, there's a lot of things to learn. I'll show you the comparison with the, I think the post stuff will probably work okay for this. But sometimes, you may see, like areas like these where, there's an object kind of right behind it, they sometimes don't resolve terribly well with the post depth of field. So, it's just something to be mindful of. There we go, starting to kind of look cool. I'm going to go and, what's my, this is still the non-blurred studio light, so I'm going to choose that one. Let's see. There we go. I don't know, some of those highlights are kind of okay, but they sort of look a bit weird over here. And we're still just looking at black and white. And quite often, this is a good way to approach lighting because it removes everything that everything else that might be distracting from your lighting. It just simplifies everything. I've just got a white shader. I do have SSS on there, which is, making it look a little bit nicer. But I don't have anything else going on. I don't have any distracting colors at the moment. I'm just focusing on tone. And that, it's an art technique as well, like developing up a concept using just black and white. So that you really just focus on composition and, the lighting of the shot, and then you go and refine it by adding everything in. Mohammed, my CPU is not that fancy. It is a Core i7 9700, 3.6 gigahertz. It does run, it is running at 4 point something, so it's overclocked, but yeah, it's not, I don't know if I do have a lot of memory, but I don't have the beefiest computer in the world. Thanks, Bartos. Yeah, look, sometimes my camera does freeze, and I think it's probably just trying to do too much, But yeah, we'll living on the edge, streaming and rendering. Thanks for joining. Yeah, look, it is getting hot in this room, I'm not going to lie. I might have to turn my aircon on at the moment. Let's see. I don't know if you guys can see that. 28 degrees. I think I started at around 22, so it is a bit of a heater. Maybe I should open the door. Alright, so I don't know, let's say that's okay. I'm not like totally in love with the lighting, but I think it's alright. Now, depth of field for post, if we want to do that in post and not in 3D, let's go to images, extra image planes, and turn on shading depth. And then it's going to output this PZ. There you go, you can see a nice Z depth there. So we can use that in Nuke for doing depth of field. I'll show you that. But let's take a look at the shader and making something a bit more interesting. So I've got some black and white variation there. Yeah, it's kind of could be something else. Let's see what we have here. I'm going to do an attribute VOP. I'm going to do a random off of PT num. Now my point number is not changing through this sim, it's staying constant. So I can use point number, and if I feed that into, let's say, a ramp, and output that as CD, I'll just make it infrared. These colors should stay constant. There you go. You can see how they're not flicking around. So if the points were being deleted, like, you know, via age or something, if they were particles, point number might not be a good one to use. So you might want to create an ID attribute or something. But in this case, it works fine because I'm not actually deleting any particles. So the point number is remaining at whatever it was before the simulation. So 41,392, you can see that just stays the same from the very first frame to the last. So we can do random based on point number. Hard constraint shape matching. Oh yeah, I haven't actually had a look at that yet, but that does look cool. Vellum is great, you know, it's really worth playing around with. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. I haven't looked at the Vellum fluid much anymore, but unicorn vomit mode, that's right. Just you wait, I'm gonna make it extra sparkly in a second. So, you know, that's okay. I mean, we could choose different colors, but let's go and have a look at what that looks like now. So we've got our material. We need to turn back on, use point color, and then I'll set my base color to white. What sort of PC do you have, Shahari? Yikes, those colors look kind of not great. I mean, that yellow looks not amazing. Let's check out my color correction. Raising the gamma makes it look a little bit more interesting. I feel like I'm working on a Sony commercial now. You know, and this is the type of stuff that you're doing when you, I don't know if you guys know the commercial, I think it's a Bravia commercial or something from a long time ago, but bouncing balls or something. All these commercials, you know, they do this kind of stuff with spheres. Keep it simple, but make it look really kind of interesting. And now, you know, maybe we need to go brighter with our lights. If I'm going for this really kind of colourful, poppy image, maybe I need to go even brighter. Yeah, that's right. So, you know, to brighten this up, we could go and add emission. You know, we've got emission on our shader. But I don't want to have everything be emissive. And I actually don't want everything to be SSS either. So perhaps we go back to our attribute VOP and we start doing some, you know, randomization of other things. So let's go and add a turbulent noise in here. And, you know, perhaps what I might do, because this noise is actually going to, see how that noise is flickering? Because it's just based on point positions. So as the point positions change, they phase through the noise, basically. So what I'm going to do, our first frame is this one. So I'm going to put a rest position node down. And I'm going to put a time shift down. And freeze that to frame 1. So this becomes my rest position, this first frame. Feed that into the rest node. And now I have this static rest position in there as an attribute I should delete some of these attributes so I can see what's going on, but there it is there, rest. I could also create a rest position up here. I just don't want to resimulate. Probably there. Maybe I would create it. But now I can use that as my reference. So I'm going to put a bind down. Pause into that. Choose rest. Choose 3 floats vector. There we go. And now what you'll see is that the noise colors stay constant the whole time. So that's cool. Let's put a fit down. As I mentioned earlier, this is like contrast, so I can crush it to give some of the points, you know, values. So I could kind of choose, hey Rizwan, your computer is an old one, Shahari. Yeah, look, Houdini, you know, it is a bit of a beast. It does really take a lot of resources. So, but you know, you can kind of adjust and adapt to whatever system you have. There we go. So something like this could work for maybe, let's bind export. I'm going to bind export here, emit int. I think that's what it's called. The way to check is to go to your shader, hover over the parameter, and you can see that emit int, one word. So no underscore. There we go. And let's unhook our one there, like that. The other thing that we could do is bind export emit color. So if we have a look at our shader, we've got this emission color here. We can use point color. Maybe we'll just do that. No, we don't have to worry about it. I'm going to set the emission intensity to 1 because do I need to do that? Maybe. Let's leave it at 0 and see. Can't remember. But having the attributes present on the points is the main thing that you kind of need. Let's just see how this works. See if we get any really bright spheres. You can do it. Oh, there we go. That one looks like it might be glowing. Let's go to our mantra context now and add an extra image plane called Emission. Combined emission, yeah. This will allow us to... right. Just borrowing it, hey Shahari. So this will allow us to just see the emissive components. And I chose all, or combined emission now. So what we're actually seeing is both direct emission and indirect emission, where the emission is reflected on these reflective spheres. That's the indirect emission that we're seeing. So if you want to just see the ones that are glowing and not the other ones reflecting it, you would choose direct emission and kill CPU, add the SSS. Yeah, that's right. It is making it a little slow. There we go. So see how that now is just the direct emission? It's not showing up in the reflections. Sometimes when you're compositing and you're recombining things, or you split everything up into its layers and then combine them, sometimes you'll find that you're missing a component. If you compare the original render and then your split and recombined render, you're missing a component. Sometimes it can be that indirect component, especially if you've used all direct passes. But there we go. So that has brightened things up a bit. It also brightens things up in the dark areas. So perhaps one thing that we could do is, you know, turn down this light, for example, which is illuminating this stuff underneath. And, you know, we have these emissive spheres kind of providing some interesting illumination in the darkness. I don't know. Let's see what else. Oh, so the other thing I want to do, let's go, I'm just going to go and add a whole direct lighting per component. This is another good diagnostic one when you're building shaders and lighting. Yeah, that's right. Just you wait. I haven't even begun to add the sparkle. So here now I can see all of the lighting components. You can see there's no diffuse because I have SSS on, and SSS will kill the diffuse. There's my reflection. Don't have a coat, don't have refract, but I get them in here because this is just showing me every component. No volume. I do have SSS, and you can see everything has SSS. So let's go and add some variance to that. I think it's SSS int, but let's check. Oh, it's just called SSS here. It might be called SSS int on a classic shader. So we've got our attribute prop here. Let's just get rid of that palm. Let's call this one SSS. And so I just move my CD output depending on what I want to look at. Maybe I could use a random here. That's going to give me that kind of look. And I can crush that as well to provide variance. Should be constant. There we go. So I could output that into SSS. Now let's just hook that up again. Whoa, okay, not that. There we go. Render view, render. So, you know, this is a really good way of creating very interesting shading and lighting by varying this stuff across each sphere, creating really interesting kind of look. You can see now, you can see some of them look very just solid. And if we have a look at our diffuse, you can see how the diffuse now is present again, because some of them aren't getting any SSS at all. So, you know, maybe some of those we need to kind of look at. I mean, look at this color, that's kind of gross. I guess it's maybe that one's like getting half SSS or something. Some of them are getting, you know, some amount of SSS, but not all. It's looking a bit more interesting though. It's got some more variance to it, which is kind of cool. Now, what else could we do? We could look at adding a coat. Let's turn the coat on. So here it is here, coat. And this is like, you know, your car paint kind of shader where you have a shader of reflection, you know, some sort of reflection on your shader, but then you also add a really gloss coat as well. So you can see how that's added these, you know, super bright reflections over the top. And that can be an interesting component to add. And sometimes I'll just leave it on full and then knock it back in comp, so you can see it there. And if we have a look at the reflect component, we've got that. We could add some roughness to this reflection, so it's not super glossy. So it is more glossy. I don't know which way that goes. I think glossy is blurry. So we'll blur those out in the base reflection. And then our coat can be the like full glassy reflection. There we go. Absolutely, you're right. Although the thing is, these are grains, so that's why they're all the same, because they're you know, they're colliding with each other. So that is important, but yes, you are right. The P scale is all the same, and it does look a little boring. So we can definitely change that. The other thing that I'm going to do is add in those kind of constraint connections that I had coming from my Vellum solver. So, you know, if we go back and have a look at this, let's output our constraints and see what they look like. There they are there, those kind of ribbons, strings. Now I could use those, or I could use new ones. If I wanted to do connect adjacent pieces, I could create some brand new ones. Adjacent points, oh, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. So, you know, I could create brand new ones if I wanted to. But I think the ones that are coming from the simulation are okay. So, I could merge those together, just to see. Let's do it down here, let's see what that looks like. Oh, I need to apply the same offsets and retimes here. Yeah. Oh, you mean turn it into a wire simulation? That's too much fun. That's too much for me. Too much fun for me. But I will use them as a renderable wire. So there we go. And they retime just the same, hopefully. So they will give me those kind of interconnecting lines. I mean, I could use them as well as the connect adjacent pieces if I want. It just depends, depends what you're into, I suppose. So we are rendering frame 1 though. Let's go back there. Now, I probably want to output this and render it in a different object so that I can control things a little better. Let's say out wires and create another geometry container here, object merge, and say out wires in there. There we go. This one we can set back to here, and on this one, so we've got this one render wires. This one I'm going to set some attributes. So I'm just going to probably set width equals 0.001 for starters. Let's just see what that gives me. I probably should also delete all these attributes that we don't need. Everything will be gone. Except... So I don't have velocity or anything like that on these. I don't actually need any of that stuff. Yeah, and then we'll add width. Render view. Should be rendering that. I don't think I changed the object, so it should just be a star wildcard on the candidate objects. Alright, let's see. This doesn't have a material, but hopefully we'll see it render. Shahari, I started looking for a job. Most of the studios in my city expecting the junior artists to be familiar with Maya, VFX or something. Well, look, I would say if you're a beginner, it's probably a little soon to be looking for a job. It's interesting that they're looking for Maya, VFX. What studios are you looking at? I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are still Maya effects jobs out there, but Houdini is definitely the standard in a lot of places. My advice to you would just be to keep learning Houdini and to build up a good showreel so that you can use that to get a job. I think if you're a beginner, it's probably too soon, unfortunately, to be going and getting a job. I mean, you might be lucky, find a place that's happy to take you on, but you have to have something. You have to have something to kind of show in order to get that as an additional job. Is that what you mean? Oh, sorry, I don't. I mean, yeah. Look, if you have to learn Maya to get a job, I suppose that's something that you need to consider. But like for me, that wouldn't be an option. I would just go and look for a job where I can utilize Houdini if that's the thing I want to use. But I know everybody's different. Additional requirement. Yeah, look, to be honest, some studios will just say that because it's like, well, if they have it, it's a bonus. But if they don't, they'll still consider you. A lot of studios will just like put all sorts of things on their job requirements. But really, perhaps they only want you as a Houdini artist. But if you happen to know Maya, then they might be able to use you for other things. The more skills you have, the more desirable you are as an artist. But I probably wouldn't bother with learning Maya for effects. Anyway, all right. So let's go and manipulate this P scale. Ooh, interesting. I mean, one thing I have to be careful of is that what I don't want is I don't want any of these to intersect, which is it could be a danger with messing with it a little bit. I might end up with some intersections. But let's, you know, let's live on the edge, hey? I'm not loving this camera. I'm gonna punch in a little more. I want to see a bit more of this. I want to see this fill the space a little more. Oh, look at that. None of them going through the camera. Isn't that lucky? Let's create a shader for our wires as well. So I'm just going to stick a principled shader on there. Whoa, there we go. Maybe I'll just make that one completely emissive. Yeah, look, I mean, there are still studios out there that use Maya, and yeah, they may be using it because they might have been around for a long time and they can't afford to you know, change. But most studios these days, big effects studios anyway, are, you know, they're using Houdini. You could copy some fun shiny circles on the constraint points, make some balls shine from inside. Yeah, I mean, you could certainly put things inside these spheres. I mean, some of the spheres could be refractive and have things inside them as well. There's endless possibilities with this stuff. Some of these tones are awful that I'm getting, so I might go back to the variance that I have on the SSS and crush this to be like either on or off, which means probably like making this within a kind of point of itself. So like 65 to 66, for example, would really crush that original value, those original values down to being kind of on or off, hopefully. It doesn't seem to have made too much difference. Let's go back and see. Let's check it out. This one. You see how that just gives me black or white? Could be the int as well, maybe affecting it. Don't know. Let's check out the render layers. Diffuse, reflect, SSS. Yeah, it's this SSS stuff. Yeah, whatever. Fix it in post. Hey Alexi, how big should a hard drive be to save renders of complex scenes? Well, there's two different things that you need to consider with. Oops, looks like I left it black and white, which actually looks kind of cool, but you know, go back to my rainbow unicorn. Cool. Thanks, Bartos. Thanks for joining me. So it depends, Alexi, what you're talking about exactly. I mean, for simulations, that's a whole different story to renders. Renders in general are pretty light, although they can take up, you know, a fair amount of data. Simulations are another thing entirely, though. So, like, if you have lots of pyro or fluid simulations, they can take up a lot of space on disk, and I can fill up like 200 gig every day, or more, you know, depending on what I'm working on. So if you're just talking about renders, though, you may want to set aside like 50 gig. Depends what you're rendering, how much data you're embedding into your renders. Like, I've got a lot of extra image planes here, and that is going to create larger render files than if it was just a color plane. So yeah, it really does depend what you're doing, what you're outputting, how much data you're outputting. But certainly for a really complex scene, a render, just this, the output component, you know, yeah, you could easily do like 40, 50 gig. You know, you might want to set aside 100 gig just in case. But for simulations, it's, you know, it's like, well, I don't know, how much have you got? You know, it depends what you're doing. You might want to set aside a terabyte. I am frequently having to copy stuff off. I just bought another solid state drive to dump stuff onto because I keep hitting my, you know, keep filling up my drives. My drives are always full. So you can see they are just red. They're always red. I always have very little left. So yeah, you know, it just depends what you're doing. Purging your old caches, absolutely. Except if you want to come back to them, then yeah, it depends how long they take, you know. But if they're quick enough sims, then yeah, you can get rid of them and re-simulate them when you come back to them. That can definitely clear up a lot of data, and that's something I do all the time. It kills me because I know that maybe I'll need to come back to this at some point, but I can't just leave 200 gigs sitting there if I'm not using it. I don't name my drives. I don't know what they are. What are you? Yeah. I'm reluctant to delete things though, because I always know, like, you know, as soon as I delete it, somebody's going to be like, hey, can we get a render of that? And I'll be like, ah, oh, now I have to simulate that for another 2 days. I wonder if I can make this any better just by removing some of these colors. This is going to make an awful color. You can see that muddy tone there. That's not gonna produce nice tones. That's what we're seeing there. So that's probably what was going on. It was getting like some nasty tone. Let's see what else we've got here. Magma. That might be nice. Although, black? Probably not. Hey, no worries, Alexi. Ooh, look, I lost my spheres. Sometimes when you're rendering, you know, stuff like that can happen where something disappears. It's just, if you're moving stuff and changing stuff all the time, it's going to cause the render file, the IFD that gets created at render time, which is like a temporary storage of all the data in the scene. It's going to cause all that to get lost. So sometimes you just need to hit stop and re-render. I don't know where I'm getting these grey tones from. It's kind of weird. Let's look at that diffuse. Must be coming from the SSS. Maybe we should color our SSS. I just realized I'm about out of time. No, I have some kind of sad news. This is actually going to be my last stream for a while. I'm not going to be doing the streams anymore. I will be doing other things, but I won't be doing the weekly streams, which is yeah, sad. I've really enjoyed doing them. I've got 128 gig, Alexi. It's very nice. Thank you, CG Spectrum. Yeah, I'm not going to be doing these anymore, I'm afraid. I'm going to be focusing on some other content creation, which if you guys, you know, make sure you keep, you know, subscribing to the channel and liking, because you will be notified of those. But I'm going to put some time into creating some much more polished content for YouTube, for the website. I know. I have actually thought about doing my own personal streams, so if you guys, you know, if there's enough interest there, maybe I will continue doing them at some point. Probably not straight away, because I really enjoy talking to you guys every week, and I really enjoy doing this and teaching and sharing information. So, you know, that might be a possibility as well. But, you know, please make sure that you subscribe to the CG Spectrum channel if you haven't already, and you will be notified of any of that new content when it comes out. And hopefully that will be, you know, that will be worthwhile as well. But yeah, there you go. Well, this looks like a dog's breakfast. I don't know what I guess I changed that color ramp, and that sort of made it Made it look awful. Let's go back to infrared. Even though, yeah, I think some of them were picking up these tones here. It still looked a bit better. You know, it was a bit more interesting. Now, I'm going to just let this render and then I'll save it out and quickly jump into Nuke and see what our depth of field looks like. Because I did say that I was going to do that, so let's take a look at it. Some match yesterday. You talking about the tennis? I missed the end of the final, but yeah, it was cool. The bit that I saw, I had to go to bed. But it was like 5 hours or something, maybe more. Personal stream. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was just one thing that I was thinking about, so that I could keep doing them, because I really enjoy it. But if you guys follow me on LinkedIn or something, just add me and I'll post on there when I'm gonna start. I might create a new YouTube channel or something. I don't really have much on my YouTube channel. Yeah, I'm not loving this. These colours, just, I don't know, what have I done? It's this SSS. Maybe, I mean, there's a weird thing that happens when you plug in colours into SSS color. You actually get the inverse, well, maybe it's that actually. You get the inverse color of what you feed it. So if you give it like, if you look at the color ramp, if you give it yellow as the SSS color, it will actually output SSS of blue. So it kind of, it's the way that the light changes the phase of the color or something. Yeah, on the sort of backside of the SSS, you'll end up with blue. So it can be kind of tricky to get a particular color when you're doing SSS. I'm gonna crank up this value and see. Let's set this back to white, maybe. Now this actually might not be doing anything if it's being overridden by this value here. So let's try setting that to 3. Hey, there we go. Alright, I should let this render so I can take it into Nuke and show you the Z defocus quickly. It's a bit of a mess. I apologise, but yeah, what can you do? This stuff is certainly not my forte, but I have been doing a little bit of it lately. And it's interesting, you know, it's interesting doing other stuff. Well, I'm happy to help, Showreel. I'll be in my bunker when World War IV happens from your computer. Yeah, it's fun to, you know, kind of mess around with this stuff, even if it's not your the usual stuff that you might work on as an effects artist. You know, it's not all explosions and destruction. Sometimes you'll be asked to do something like this, and you'll have to kind of, you know, make it up, like I'm doing. Let's see what the temperature's doing. It's gone up another degree. Where's my camera? 29. It's gonna hit 30 before we finish. It's getting hot. It's been really hot here in Australia lately. February is usually our hottest month, but it's been quite hot here. The other thing you can play around with is, you know, the gamma correction on your image. So I'm looking at 2.2 now, which is what I usually kind of view it as. But, you know, you can see as you adjust that gamma, you can kind of create more intensity and crush that like a contrast. you can do that in comp as well. So it's almost finished. Hey Axel, any tips on how to create an appealing showreel? What can I do to stand out from the crowd? Well, you know, the biggest thing you can do is to have unique content. That's, you know, that's by far the best way to stand out. If you only have, you know, tutorial content, then that's, you know, like, yeah, I've seen 1,000 kind of reels of people, you know, when I was working at Method, and students that I see, and you know, I always see a lot of the same things, a lot of those kind of tutorials that are out there, big ones, robots crashing through things, or spaceships, or big explosions, and when I see them, I think, cool, you've done the tutorial. It doesn't really tell me anything about you as an artist. It just tells me that you can follow tutorials, which, you know, pretty much anyone can. If you're given enough instruction, you can produce anything. It is, I find it's better to, you know, to show me some unique things that show off your skills, but also show off your creativity and your ability to construct things as an artist. You know, that's what I want to see. I want to be able to judge that stuff without going, okay, you did so and so tutorial. So, and you will see other people mention this, you know, everywhere and various kind of things. I think, you know, with show reels as well, especially like junior reels. Like I sent a really good reel to the head of effects at Method the other day, and even though he was impressed by it, it was still like, you know, there were still things that he could pick on it, in it. And I think, you know, you just have to really be super critical with your stuff when you're putting your show reels out there, and just make sure that you've watched it and you're watching it with a critical eye, thinking, okay, you know, if I'm a supervisor at so-and-so, what am I going to pick on in this reel? And really kind of try your best to get rid of all those things that people might pick on, which are like, you know, little errors, weird looking things that you might think, oh, no one will notice that. They will absolutely notice that, and it'll be the first thing they notice. You know, or if your render quality isn't as good, or, you know, if there are things in there, show it to different people and get different people's opinions. Try and show it to a professional and see if you can get their opinions on it as well. And don't be kind of discouraged by that if someone says, hey, you know, you need to fix these things. Just take it on board as feedback and, you know, try and make it as good as possible. I think, yeah, you know, it's a constant kind of evolution that you take as an artist to get to your first job, where you're just constantly trying to refine things. And, you know, you just have to keep doing it. You have to keep pushing and keep pushing. And even once you are an artist in a, you know, in a role, in a job, you still have to keep pushing and learning, and it never stops. So, you know, just keep refining things, create your own things and your own kind of custom stuff, and just try and push it and make it, you know, make it better. Don't make this, you know. If I sent this to somebody, they'd be like saying all the things that I was saying, like, oh, what's going on with these awful colors, and, you know, yeah, why didn't you vary the P scale? Alright, I have a render now, and I have Nuke. And I'm just gonna bring this in. Hey, no worries. I hope that helps. You know, it's a hard thing to kind of you know, advise on sometimes, but I really think being unique and in creating your own things is a really good way to go. This is the image, I think. Yes, here it is. So, sure, Harry, send it to me. So here's where the embedded things come in Nuke. So all those image planes that I had, they're all here now. So you can see in here, I can check out what my comp looks like, my coat looks like on my diffuse layer, and I can change it and then recombine it that is a whole workflow, and you know, I've probably done other streams on that, but I can look at my lighting as well and fix it in here if I wanted to. Turn down the environment light. Maybe the environment light's too strong or something. But what I do want to look at here is depth. And there it is there. I don't really need to see it, but what I'm going to put down is a defocus. Z defocus. Ooh, blurry. Nice. You can see this is using that depth channel that's embedded here. That's this one here. So it's using it in here. And we can change the output to focal plane setup and move our focal plane. Layer setup. Oh, I think focal plane setup with show image turned off. There we go. So we should be seeing some green there. That green area there is the in focus part, I think. That's how it works. So you can see this depth of field area that I can choose. Let's go back to result. There we go. See this fringing? I mean, this is a low res image, so it's probably worse, but see this weird fringing that's happening? And this kind of stuff where I've got this like really smooth area here that's being defocused. But then this area here, which is now in focus behind, it looks odd. This is what I was talking about, where these overlaps occur. You can see this defocus here. And there are ways to kind of make it better, but these are the things that you kind of have to deal with when you're doing defocus in comp. So, but you can see, like, it can give some cool results, and depending on where you have to put your focus plane, then, you know, it can look better or worse. So you can see up here is a particularly bad overlap. See that artifacting that's going on. Some of it gets a little mushy on some of the areas. So that's why, you know, in-camera depth of field is sometimes better. But, you know, I would always use this when I'm look deving a shot or when I'm trying to get sign off on a shot, and then maybe turn on 3D depth of field at the end when the client's happy with it, you know. So there's some weird things going on here. These should be sort of in the foreground, but they're getting blurred into the background. Yeah, certainly the low-res render isn't helping with that, because the samples are all a bit mushed, but, you know. Anyway, there you go. I'm going to have to wrap it up. But thank you for being with me over the last, I don't know however long I've been doing it, 6 months or more, not sure. It's been fun. You know, if you haven't gone back and had a look at the previous streams, then please go back and check them out. There's lots of cool content there. And I will be back in some form, doing some other content and some other interesting things. And please, you know, subscribe to the channel so that you get notified of those. And if you're interested in, you know, learning from me or one of the other mentors at CG Spectrum, we're all industry, you know, professionals. We're all working in the industry, in film and TV and games and all sorts of things. So, you know, if you want to learn from people like us, then please come and check out the website, check out the courses that we offer, and yeah, feel free to, you know, drop a line and ask any questions that you might want to ask. But I will see you guys in some form in the future, and please connect with me on LinkedIn, and you know, if you're interested in this stuff, and I'll you know, I'll let you know if I'm gonna start up something else. But yeah, cool. My name's Daniel Hourigan. I am the head of effects at CG Spectrum. Come check us out. If you don't know what we're about, jump on the website, and see you guys around. Thanks, guys. No worries. Thank you, everybody.